Welcome, guys. Welcome to my learning lunch. I'm Aditya Seshadri, working for Palo around 2+ years as a DevOps Test Automation Engineer. That's in short about my profile. We will get into the session. This is the agenda for today. I'll be walking up with you guys for a few chunks of basics about API test automation. What is the essence of it? And I will introduce the karate with the project setup and folder structure, and later with a chunk of demo. And with interest to time, I'll be sharing few topics from karate just to start with. And in end, I'll be sharing the reference links for your reference if you guys want to set up the karate test automation framework. Let me start with my monolith versus microservices. So, hope everyone should be aware of it. But for those who are not aware of, I can just walk through this. So, this is an architectural approach for an application. For example, you can consider an e-commerce application where you have a user interface layer, business layer, and data layer. So, that's very common for all the applications. If we go for monolith architecture, you will be having one code base where it includes the code for all the layers. But if we go to the microservice architecture, we have a separate code base for each layer of your application. That's not the only advantage with it. In terms of other advantages, the microservice architecture can be further divided into separate services for a business layer or any other layer. One good thing about this is going to be an loosely coupled, meaning to say if there is a change with only one of the layer, in monolith you'll have to amend the whole code base. But here in the microservice, you can restrict yourself to modify only the layer which has the change, and also with respect to the respect to the scaling and other those stuff, it's going to be super easy for the microservice architecture. So that's the essence of why we are going for the microservice architecture. So where this API testing falls into the this microservice architectural approach. So as what we saw in the previous slide, we have 3 different layers, and we would be focusing more into testing the business logic, which is basically the business layer. So we have few other tools for presentation layer, testing the presentation layer, something like Selenium and Catalan and other those stuff. But here we would be restricting ourselves to know more about the API testing in this course. I'll walk through with the test pyramid. So as what you see here, this is an ideal test pyramid, but it again depends on every project. As what you see, we have an automated unit test at the bottom, and also we have component integration and API test. So the only difference between this and this is you don't have the automated API test here. So the basic essence of this, let's take an example of an application where you have 4 steps, step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and you have some 1,000 to 2,000 combinations to test. So in case if we are going for an GUI testing, which would take a lot of time, as well as that's going to be brittle. So meaning to say a browser can break and time synchronization issues. So that's why we are doing our shift left strategy to test our application combinations on API test. Yes, definitely. After doing this, still the GUI test is essential, but not to as long as you have a lot of combinations to test. And again, not only with respect to the time consumption, but it's also an brittleness of an testing approach. So that's the reason why we are going for automated API test. I'll take a minute on explaining the API testing process. So let's take again, we have a project and then we are going to start with the API testing. We'll have to first understand the architectural approach about the APIs, if it's going to be an SOAP or it can be even a REST, and based on that, we'll have the specification development, which is basically we will get to understand about the contracts, and we'll get to have the sample JSON request response. And based on the specification, the framework development would be happening, which is the 3rd step. And the fourth step would be the test cases development. Once we identify which are all the REST endpoints for the microservices, so we can have each test for one microservice REST endpoints, and later we can have an execution to be put it in the CI pipeline. Let's say for an example, for each commit, there can be an API test which can run, which thousands of combinations to give you an feedback I mean, it's actually a quicker feedback. So this is the API testing available tools in market. So back then days, I've been working on with SOAP UI and Rest Assured. Uh, but later I fell in love with one of the tool, which is basically Karate. So I can take a quick view on this project's Karate project setup. It's basically you need to have an IDE, integrated development environment. It can be an IntelliJ or it can be an Eclipse. My preferred is IntelliJ. And the runtime here, I'll be preferring to Java. Uh, some message. Okay, thanks, Josh. Yeah. So the build tool which we would be referring here is Maven. You can also go with Gradle. And for to ease your script development process, you can have a Cucumber for Java plugin and CSP plugin, where the links I have shared in the reference section. So this is the folder structure and the naming conventions which you have to follow for the Karate test automation framework. So as what you see here, this is the sample project which I have developed to show you guys. So I here have modularized according to the REST endpoints, which is also an pattern, or you can go with an application services for each service. So this is the way how it would be referring to, as in you have one service inside which you have multiple endpoints, and inside which you will have multiple scenarios. So one way is to modularize with services, or we can go with the endpoints. So in our case, we are seeing on the endpoints. So I'll start with the demo. Are you guys able to see my screen? Someone can reply so that I can.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, sure. Thanks. So here, this is the same project which I was referring to. Uh, so here you can see you have uh, for each feature for each feature, I mean, there is a feature for each REST endpoints. So here we have 4 REST endpoints, which we have taken for consideration to testing. Uh, so I've been referring to an dummy REST API, which is a publicly available API into our consideration. Let me walk through with the configuration file first. Probably we can start from there. The base URL and as well as the routes can be given here. So like what you see here is the get, post, put, as well as delete as a different endpoints for which have given the path along with the base URL, which is basically the application. In the configuration file, it has an advantage where based on the environment, you will be able to pass the multiple base URL. That's something which I want to show later. Then we will just get back quickly into the one of the example. So here you can see the get feature. As what I was seeing, you can look at the background section where this section would be executed before each of the scenario. So in order to give an very short note about the background as well as the scenarios, a feature file which is basically an simple English format, Gherkin format you have, and it has a multiple scenarios inside. And again, for each scenario, we can have multiple data-driven tests. So this is the format which how the Karate framework is devised. And what you see here is as the background section, which gets executed before each of the scenario. So let's take for an example where we are hitting the uh, get. So when I say get users, it basically refers to the get users path, and we are matching the response. So matching the response could be done in a couple of ways, which I'll be showing you later. So one is with you can give the expected response in the feature file itself. And again, the second, you can have an reference JSON format. Uh, uh, but one naming convention which you need to take care is the reference. If a feature file is referring to any other files for the execution, that should be inside the same folder. So that's why if you can see here, I'm reading the user JSON. It's simple, quite simple, as in I have the same JSON response. I've put it into another file. So in order to refer the user's JSON, it should be inside the same package. Uh, so this so this is the line to match the response, and so once you hit the API, you can validate the response as well as the response status. So here, this is the line to validate the response status. And again, we also have few regular expressions, which I'll be coming to the later part, where you will be able to query the response and parse the response. Unlike the rest assured, here in Karate, it's quite simple to query the response from the JSON and validate the response, as what you see here. So for an example, here I'm querying the response, the whole data, and I'm matching I'm here asserting the match of this response with the data, which you have seen here. Uh, so probably I will execute this, or I can just show you with the rest of the endpoints, and later I can execute as a whole. So next you will be seeing for the post request. So here, as what you see, similarly to the get, we have the background which would be executed on start, and the post, since it's an HTTP verb of post, you have to pass some request. So how I'm passing here is I'm getting the values from the CSV, which is basically the data-driven approach of testing. So this is the CSV file where the post request refers to. So where this is the request which I'm passing, as what you see here, the variable name gets substituted from the value here. And as what you see here is how many rows of data you have in the post, those many times the feature file would be executed. This is about the post as well as how to refer the CSV file. And the third is the put, which is basically the updation. So here, as what you see, similarly to the post, it again refers to the CSV file, and the value is taken from here. And the last one is the delete. It's basically deleting the record. So here, as such, you don't have to pass any value. So it's basically deleting the record in the backend. So next, I'll be executing all the 4 tests together. So how I'm passing this as an Cucumber options is with the tags. So here, as what you see, you have the same tags above all the scenarios. So that this is one of the way for grouping your test cases. And if you pass that as a tag with the command line, as what you see here, all the tests marked with the tag would be executed. So let's start our execution. So all the tests marked with the tag execute has been completed now, and we can look the results inside the Cucumber HTML report. So this is an external reporting which I have configured in the test automation framework. So here, as such, what you see is you have the failures, steps, and tags. So I will refer with the features. So this is the HTML file which is generated out of the execution result. Here, as what you see, you have 4 different feature files executed, which is as same as what you have seen here. And what is the result out of each 4 is what could be seen here. So why this of 60 rows is basically because I have those many rows for the post request. So here, as what you see, I have 10 rows of data for the post. So that's where you can have for each so the same post method would be executed for 10 different times. This is basically an essence of uh, test data driven of your test execution. And I'll quickly want to show what happens when there is a failure. For that, I don't want to execute all. Probably I will execute one test case. I'll tag with execute now, and I'll change some value here. So I'll change it to 400. So here my expectation is once the get is hit, I'm expecting the status as 400, and let's see what happens. So here I have to change it to execute now. So now, as what you see, only the scenario which is marked with this tag would be executed. So here I can see the test cases fail, and we will be able to see the reason here. Or we can just go with the features. So here you can see it is fail, and let's see what is the reason. As what you see here, this step has failed. So why is that? Because the expectation is 200, but sorry, the actual is 200. The expectation I have given as 400. So this is how the Karate test automation framework handles the errors. And then let me quickly take through. Okay, so let me quickly go back to the presentation. So these are all the topics. Okay. So these are all the topics which I have covered recently. Karate configuration files, the background session, and the validate response code. So as what you see here, the validation of the response code is with the statement, the same example which you have seen now. And the validate response. So here, a couple of validations could be not actually couple. You have a lot of validations which can be performed, but here we are considering a couple of scenarios, validating the response code and also validating the response text itself. So as what I was showing you, the response text could be validated in a couple of formats. One is with the inline feature, which is basically this. Yeah. So here you can see the match response equal to. So here the karate would be validating the response. Or the second format is basically this match response equal to read a value from a external JSON file, which I have seen here. And the pass the data from CSV file, which is basically what we have seen in the post request. The next one, which I'll be taking up, is on the regular expression for passing the response and how to assert it. So here I have few scenarios. So for easy purpose, probably I'll open the JSON file. So this is the JSON file which we are considering. Probably I'll close all and I'll open only, yeah. So this is the JSON file which we are validating into. So let's take an example where you need to, sorry, is there any interruptions? Hello? Okay.
I think you can continue.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So here we are considering the scenarios. Here I have already given few scenarios to get an essence of how easy it is to assert and as well as to parse the data from the JSON. So here is a JSON, and you want to get the length of the data array. This is how you will be able to get the length of the data array. So here you can see the response of which data, which is this object, and the length. Probably I'll execute at last, but I'll explain you guys first what is this about. And how, okay, you have got the count of the array, but how to assert it. That's with this line. So you have got the length of the array, and then here is what you are asserting the count. And there are a few other complex regular expressions which could be written easily with Karate, which is basically this. Show all the user IDs from response. So here, as what you see inside the data, you have different IDs from 1 till 24. So if I want to get or fetch only the IDs out of this JSON, this is the way you'll have to parse it. So you're getting the response, and star here refers to all the values, but which key I'm referring into is given here, ID. So similarly, if you want to fetch all the employee names, it can be given in this format. Here, the employee name refers to the key here. And further, if you want to show the third employee name from the response, uh, you can do in this format. So as what we know, the array index starts from 0. So if I give the data of 2 dot employee name, that refers to the third employee name. 0, 1, 2, basically it's the third employee name from this array. And something very different one which we can do it very easily is, let's say you want to show only the last 2 employee names. You can give in this format of -2 colon empty, which gives you the last 2 array values. And one complex example which I've given here is, I want to show the employee names from the response where the employee salary is greater than 100K. So as what you see here. So here what I essentially mean here is, I want to get the employee name where the employee salary is greater than 100K. So this is the way to construct the regular expression. So here, as what you see here, data is the array, and which key I'm interested is with the employee name. But what is the predicate or what is the condition here? The employee salary should be greater than 100K. So let's put everything together, and then we can have the execution again. I think I have changed to 200, because if it's not changed, it doesn't go to the next row. Yeah. So it gets executed, and we can see the values in the result. Sorry, features. Yeah. So here, as what you see, it's pass. One cool thing to show here is we can also see the pie chart for the scenario, steps, and other things. And let's get inside the scenarios. So here, let's go one by one. As what you see, the data star ID, which gives all the employee IDs, which is basically from this JSON. And the length, here you have 24, the same here. And the third, I want to get the employee names. So this is the way it has fetched all the employee names. And the here is third employee name I'm printing here, hashed on box. So if we go here, this is going to be the third employee name. And the next one is to show the last 2 employee names, which is Caesar Vance and Doris Wilder. So it's basically Caesar Vance and Doris Wilder, the last 2. And the last one, the employee names from response where the employee salary is greater than 100K. So it has executed the regular expression, and it has fetched all the values for which the employee salary is greater than 100K. It's about this. And oh yeah, one thing also which I can show you is retry until. So there would be a few situations where you'll have to handle the time synchronization with the API response. So let's take for an example, you're hitting an API and then you have to wait until you get a response. So you can see here how it's handled in Karate in a very easier way. There is a object called retrieve until, where once you get the users, this will wait until the users not equal to empty, so that it makes sure it gets fetches all the values and it shows in the response. That's about the retrieve until, and as well as the reports which I have shown you guys. Uh, yeah, pretty much good with my presentation, and I can open for the Q&A session.
Hi Adi, Vijay Lakshmi here.
Yeah, hi Vijay.
Yeah. So whether can we able to see one scenario where we can able to pass the response of one scenario into the input of another scenario request?
Yeah, definitely. We can see, but I haven't configured here. But how it would be done is you take an value, which for an example, uh, the users count, right? So here you are defining a variable which you're fetching a value of the user count. In case if you want to pass with an the uh, next
Request.
scenario,
Yeah.
here I could not show, but I can tell you how you need to pass. This is the way which you need to pass. So this variable with the hashtag would be taken as a value which you have fetched with the previous count. I mean previous value.
Okay. So whether this one can be able to pass in our request?
Yeah, we can pass. So let's take for an example. You have the first API where uh, in a typical example, a login, and later then you're in a e-commerce website, you would be adding products to the cart. So what you do is once you log in, you get an session ID or it's an JWT token where you can either pass to and request headers. It again depends on the application how it is devised, but you can put it in a variable and you can pass in this format which I have shown here to the further requests, so that that would be taken into consideration. But apart from this, if you're looking for an session and cookies, it's automatically handled in Karate, which is one cool thing in Karate.
Okay, so it will be handled during the running time, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we have to make sure that we first run those scenario first where we are retrieving the input or output, right? I mean,
definitely. You're
okay.
you're, you're right. It's a recommended way is not to have an dependency between the scenarios. You can have it as one scenario which having the whole flow. In case if you could not do due to some reasons, then you can put it into a variable and have that variable as part of a background where it's initialized as global and you can use in the subsequent scenarios.
Okay, yeah, making sense. Thank you.
You- Is there any other
Yeah, Adi, this is Shutulbu.
example boss?
So this is more to help Vijay in our project. How do you use karate in an event-driven architecture? If you can, I don't know.
Okay, I honestly I haven't tried with event-driven architecture, but then what I have seen few references is it supports to a good extent in event. So when you say event-driven architecture, it's more into an Kafka kind of. Is that
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
correct.
So I mean, it's same with the microservices. If you have an event-driven, it should support.
Fine.
Just to have I have given here a few reference links. So where I have given the Learning Lunch GitHub link, which is basically this project, which you can take it as in base for the reference for developing the API test automation suite. It has one example for get, put, post, and delete. Is there any other queries?
Adi, the last question from my part.
Sure.
You have mentioned about this microservices structure, right? Where according to which you are analyzing all the endpoints. So here in your framework, I can see there are 4 endpoints you have taken for one scenario, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
So, so how, I mean, is it for all the microservices we have to take care and write it separate as a feature? It's more basically talking about the project structure. So,
Okay, I understand your question. So it's more basically into us how we pattern this. As I was saying during the meeting, you can have a couple of approaches. One is with respect to services, you can have all the endpoints. So basically, for each service, you will have different endpoints. Is that right? So
yeah.
one way is you can have your folder structure for service name, under which you can have all feature files with one CSV. That is one way, or otherwise you can have different folders for different endpoints. So here I can say it as this is the feature for testing the deletion of user rest endpoint. So here I can also do in such a way that I can have one folder inside which all the four feature files referring to one CSV and one JSON. Both are good patterns to have your framework.
Okay. Okay.
Did
Okay.
did I answer your question?
Um, yeah, but how then you will specify the dependency if you are writing all the endpoints separately? I mean to
Okay.
say, yeah,
In case of dependency, when you say dependency between the features or dependency between the scenarios,
between the scenarios.
okay. Ideally, if it's a dependency between the scenarios, you can handle with the global variables. Dependency between features is not a recommendable way.
Okay. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Adia.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm curious, Zoe here. I'm curious to know if there's any application for testing the performance of API with Karate.
Hmm? Yeah,
Is it one of, is it one of the use case that we can use a Karate for?
yeah, it's actually a good question. I have also seen the karate supports the performance testing as well. So they have a different suite for karate testing. I mean the performance testing. So let's take. I mean you can always refer back to this Intuit Karate where they have this GitHub shows all the things which you are looking for. So I'm sure that they have few support for the performance also. Apart from this, if you simply want to check only the time, you can get it from the response time and you can validate it here. That's the simplest way of doing. But apart from that, you also have an explicit support from Karate for performance testing.
Thank you. I will check it out.
Adi, just a quick question again.
Sure, sure.
Is it okay for me to say that for all the scenarios we can consider as individual microservices?
Sorry, what's your question again?
I mean, my question is for each scenario, can I consider that each scenario belongs to one microservice?
Each scenario, okay, so you mean to say, so there would be one folder here inside which will
Uh,
have one feature file having only one scenario. Is that right?
No.
Can I? Hi, this is Jesh.
Yeah.
Vijay, is your question that can we hit multiple endpoints in the same feature files in different scenarios? Is that what you're trying to ask?
No, my question more on to the microservices part. I mean, how we are segregating those microservices into scenarios.
Okay. Yeah, I got your question. It again depends on if you want to have scenarios. One ideal approach, as what I was saying, is you can have one folder for each microservice inside which one feature file containing multiple scenarios pertaining to that endpoint or pertaining to that scenario, pertaining to that I would say it's a feature of an application. For example, let's take an login, a very basic one. So login is a feature, so for which you'll be having a folder, inside which you'll have a feature file. And each scenario can be, one of the scenario can be a positive login, another can be a negative login, so on and so forth.
Okay, 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 okay. If I ask about Gmail structure, if I need to test the compose and spam and I think inbox, right? So those three, my question is more into, is it all the three are coming from different microservices, or it is coming under one microservices, or it depends? That is my question.
Actually, it depends on how the application is devised. So in this case, it's actually a valid thought, I would say. So in this case, as what you see, so these three you can consider, if you consider it as a different microservice altogether, then you can have different scenarios for it. But in case if it's consumed from the same microservice, then you can have put it together into one same feature file with different scenarios.
Okay.
It again depends
Yeah.
on how the application is.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yep.